Hello, BillWhittle.com members and non-members too. We're opening this one up to the public because this is part two of what I'm calling the new robber barons, the monopolists of this digital age of ours. The story broke late last week of the Google engineer who wrote a pro-diversity memo that acknowledged sex differences between men and women, and of course he was canned on Monday night for daring to expose or to express actual diversity in the face of diversity groupthink at Google. And I got to thinking, there's a bigger story here. It's Google not just treating its employers as an oppressor, but also treating its customers as a monopolist would. You look at what happens with censorship on YouTube and on Facebook as well, which owns a virtual monopoly in personal networking. And you've got Apple, which is the largest corporation in the world. And who am I missing out here? I know I must be missing one. But these huge digital companies have the ability at times to run roughshod over their customers while they reap billions of dollars in profits. And let me tell you just how these are run, gents. This one's scary. Breitbart put together a great piece showing all of these public statements by Google executives on how they treat their employees. And I picked one out of here for you. It's Google's Colin Winter who wrote, this is a quote, "One of the great things about Google's internal communications mechanism is that as a manager, I can easily go find out if I really want to work with you." So this is a warning. He says, "I keep a written blacklist of people whom I will never allow on or near my team based on how they view and treat their coworkers." That blacklist got a little bit longer today. Bill, we've talked before about this, about the impossibility of breaking up a company like Facebook because it's a network. You can't just stop people from joining a network. Or Google, which is essentially a search engine. And you can't split off YouTube because it would go broke without Google's deep pockets. What kind of antitrust action can you take against a virtual monopolist like this?
And this is the problem, right? This is the ethical problem we find ourselves in. On one hand, we understand as conservatives that these are private companies, that we opt into them, and that's a voluntary act on our part. We pay them. They're owned by individuals, and those individuals can do whatever they want with their company because that's their company. And I think that has to basically trump everything, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But there is a compelling case to be made that since so much of the world's communication now travels through these venues, Facebook, Google, and to some extent YouTube, but certainly Facebook and Google, so much interpersonal communication is shared through these two networks that it is in fact a public utility. And if it was being run fairly, there would be no problem. But here's where I think if I had to make a legal case for it, here's where I would make the case. Google is not informing me that my opinions, and Facebook too, is not informing me that my political opinion is going to impact how much my message gets spread and who sees it and by whom. And they're not informing me how much they're suppressing it and how much they're advancing their political point of view. So on some level, I would make the case that, while I'm sure it's buried on page 270 of the terms of agreement that everybody clicks on, they are not, in fact, providing full disclosure to their clients, because if they are filtering for political views, then they are doing something that I certainly am not aware of while they're doing it, right? I think that's probably where I would go with it. I know I spoke to the marketing director of Prager University. He said something like they did 250 million views last year. They've done 300 million this year already.
Wow.
And something like 23 of their videos, which we all know are absolutely vulgarity-free, using simple animated backgrounds, 23, I think was the number, 21, 23, have been put on the "you must be over 18 to watch."
Because of dangerous ideas, that if you're 17 and a half, you shouldn't be allowed to watch.
Well, just the fact that they can simply arbitrarily say. Now, YouTube said that, no, it's just the algorithm. You did one on the Korean War, and, we want to protect families from war and violent imagery. To which I say, have you seen the numbers on any of these live game streams, which get 100 million views of people taking knives and slitting people's throats and blowing them up against the wall. So that's nonsense. And he also said, look, if it was an algorithm, what happens when sometimes people will just steal a video? They'll do that for me or for Right Angle. They'll just download it, upload it to their channel. Digitally, it is the exact same file, but there's no under 18 filter being applied to somebody who's not Prager University. Finally, somebody from YouTube emailed this guy and said, no, it's done by humans. And we had a number of people review them, and we all agreed on all 21 of them that they should be made 18 or older. So there's no question it's happening. That's a form of fraud. And I am not going to be the guy calling for government regulations on a private business. I'm just not going to be that guy. But there is a form of fraud here, and that, I think, is where I would go with it.
All right, Scott, let me, here's the conundrum we're in, I guess is how I want to phrase this. Even though Google and Facebook kind of ghettoize people with conservative or libertarian viewpoints, and now are in the business of firing employees who deviate from the party line, we still find these services to be useful. We upload our right angles to YouTube. We share them on Facebook, and although they are denying us traffic that we should earn, they still give us just enough traffic to keep us going. What do we do to break this vicious cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, Bill made that analogy that it's like a public utility. And this would be like me saying, well, I'm really upset with the electric company, so from now on, I'm going to generate all my electricity here. I'm just going to do it. Yeah. I'm going to do it on site. It's possible to do that. It's just incredibly difficult.
And try and get the permits, right?
Yeah. And so, my thorium reactor installation permit is coming up any month now. That's right. So it just, you want to say, like, I don't want to have to be the guy who goes to Bing. I'm not going to Bing.
Yeah, we have our standards. I may plead, but I would never beg.
That's right. I have been on Bing before. I cannot stand it. And Google does a lot of good things for my life, and it facilitates a lot of things that make life easier for me. So as Stephen Green, you've said oft times before, I'm sure quoting somebody whose name I now forget, that the remedy for bad speech is not no speech, it's more speech. It's being able to fight back. It's being able to make videos like this and basically say, hey, don't be evil, Google. Mr. Credo that starts with don't be evil. This is evil. You started off with evil in this situation. You took an employee who expressed an unpopular opinion and you blackballed him. You kicked him out. You cut off his sustenance. And frankly, you've harmed the industry. You've harmed him with the industry as a result of that. So it's not going to be real easy for him to just jump to some other tech company in Silicon Valley. But the reality is that Google's not doing this at the behest of profits. Google is doing this at the behest of government. Google is doing this because it thinks that that's what Uncle Sam wants it to do. That's because we have all kinds of regulations involving, avoiding discrimination. And we're all in favor of not discriminating against people or oppressing people because of their race or their sex or anything else. But when the government looks at it, they can't figure out a way to systematize it. So they have to say the only way we can measure this is by outcome. So if 50% of your employees aren't female, then you've got a problem. So you've got to do something to get that number to 50%. And this guy who wrote the memo at Google was basically saying it may not be possible to do that because of just the demographics and the differences between men and women and how education works and all that kind of stuff. And he's blackballed. Google is cowering at the feet of big government and saying, please don't hurt us. We'll be glad to sacrifice this guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, you may be onto something, but I also think that Google, if they aren't already, is becoming a big part of what I call the Democrat media complex. But
that's right.
We'll see how that plays out. At the beginning of this segment, I mentioned Apple, and Apple kind of reminds me of IBM or General Motors back in those companies' heyday. And the federal government had looked at using antitrust to break up IBM and to break up General Motors, not because they were monopolists, but just because they were big. But because GM sold cars and because IBM sold computers, physical objects, competitors came along pretty quickly and gobbled up their businesses. The Japanese came along with smaller, more fuel-efficient cars when that's what people wanted, and GM went never quite recovered. And the same thing happened to IBM and the dawn of the personal computer. So I don't really worry about Apple as much as I worry about Google and Facebook. But there is this conundrum of how do you break up a network, and you really can't, no matter how oppressive they may be to their customers and now even their employees. But I did think of this. Why does Google own your data? Why does Facebook own your data? Because they make your money off of your clicks, which they then sell to advertisers to put up, as Steve Jobs called it, crappy little banner ads. And what instead maybe we should do is pressure Congress to pass a Data Protection Act where Google and Facebook have to share their massive profits with their massive users. You would get a check every month from your Google account and your Facebook account that would reflect your share of the profits they generated off of your clicks. This would put the big pinch on their bottom lines. It would put money in your pockets that you earn through your mouse clicks, and I don't know, it's so crazy it just might work. And that's your members angle, or members only right angle for this week on our digital robber barons. This is brought to you by the paying members of BillWhittle.com, and we're opening this one up to the public because we think the message is just that important this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.